I am so proud today to stand on the affirmation of this House regrets the rise of therapy talk. Per the info slide, therapy talk refers to a rapidly growing number of therapy influencers on TikTok and those who consume their content. Just to clarify that a little bit more, it's the rapidly growing influential community on TikTok comprising of mental health professionals, therapists, and content creators who share, discuss, and offer advice on mental health topics in short form videos. An observation following that. The resolution is specifically talking about advice given by therapy influencers, not things like experiences, meaning we are specifically regretting the rise of advice regarding mental health topics being shared on TikTok. That means promotion of mental health related struggles is still allowed in the opposition world, as are longer form videos of articles. The opposition is specifically regretting advice shared on TikTok in the form of short form videos. So, for example, a video of a beauty TikToker ranting about her mental health struggles would not count because that's not advice. And just to clarify, we would define this house as everyone. So we, in general, that could be the judges, opponents, myself, and my partner. And we believe since the core of this topic is always going to end up centering on mental health, the round should be decided based upon who can best help the mental health crisis. Thus, our first contention is worsening the current mental health issues. Subpoint A is misdiagnoses. On social media platforms like TikTok, what gets the most publicity is what is the most polarizing or emotionally charged, meaning videos containing dramatic information are much more likely to circulate and be clicked on than more mundane videos with actual information. This TikTokification of therapy has fueled misinformation, even incentivizing creators to purposefully spread false information for clout. Studies suggest that over 83% of mental health advice on TikTok can be misleading, with many videos offering inaccurate information about diagnoses. As a result, therapy content on TikTok can negatively impact mental health by creating oversimplified, inaccurate, or misleading information, leading to self-misdiagnosis, increased anxiety, and pathologizing normal emotions. While normalizing mental health, 15-second algorithm-driven videos can spark and replace professional care, often causing users to delay necessary personalized in-depth treatment. So-called comfort in online communities prevents individuals from seeking the necessary, tailored, and evidence-based treatment from a licensed professional. Secondly, because these videos are so short, they miss the nuance of the mental health crisis. Misusing clinical terms like gaslighting or trauma, specifically for clout, can cause individuals to incorrectly identify their struggles, such as mistaking autism for complex trauma or vice versa. You cannot be diagnosed with a mental health issue just through watching a 30-second video. And while many people understand that, TikTok's main demographic, young adults and teens, often do not. Studies have found that over 25% of teens have self-diagnosed themselves, with most of their information coming from social media platforms like TikTok. Misdiagnosis prolongs one's ability to actually reach out and go to an actual therapist because they might believe that they already understand their own conditions. Some videos even make claims that therapy is a scam or that certain drugs don't work, preventing people from actually receiving a proper clinical diagnosis. For example, videos describing symptoms of ADHD or OCD often lack nuance, reducing these conditions to catchy sound bites. This can create a confirmation bias loop in which users interpret normal emotional experiences as a sign of disorder. As a result, the rise of therapy culture on TikTok has made mental health discussions more superficial. Creators, both professional and amateurs, share mental health tools and terminology, often stripping them of their clinical context. Indeed, a significant portion of therapy creators are not licensed professionals, as 91% of influencers offering mental health tips lacked proper qualifications in one study. That means that overall, we see that people are less inclined to seek real professionals, decreasing their impact need, and overall, meaning that less people actually seek out certified therapists, instead substituting them for a bunch of influencers who are unqualified. Subpoint B is worsening the current mental health crisis. The excessive promotion of mental health content in the form of doom scrolling also reduces attention spans, causes mental fatigue, and promotes a doom scrolling cycle. The algorithm promotes videos excessively, creating what's known as reinforcement loops and a negative mood. That's because they amplify emotionally stimulating content such as sensational news, or idealized lifestyle posts regarding mental health, often leading to doom scrolling, which ends up reinforcing anxiety, sadness, and fear. Indeed, these sorts of models unintentionally favor extreme or sensational content, which reinforces negative emotional states and worsens mental health. For example, a teen watching one video about anxiety might soon find themselves inundated with clips about panic disorders or PTSD. This can exacerbate pre-existing concerns and create a cycle of hyper-awareness and self-doubt. Moreover, studies link these sorts of heavy social media use to greater anxiety, depressive symptoms, loneliness, and a fear of missing out, especially among teens and young adults. Subpoint C is treatment with misuse. Misinformation doesn't just cause people to misdiagnose, it causes people who have been diagnosed to improperly use their medications. For example, TikTok trends of going off antidepressant drugs, so-called cold turkey, or challenges where you can take an increased dose of medication have run rampant across TikTok. Likewise, content often promotes hacks or immediate solutions, for example, using salt on the tongue for anxiety, that are not scientifically backed or safe for everyone. Our last contention is privacy. There have been direct instances of therapists on TikTok posting content that includes or relates directly to their clients, sometimes using identifiable details or reenactment that raise ethical concerns. That's even extended to posting images of faces or of a client's vacation, all for clicks rather than actually helping people. Those sorts of
Okay.
specific, intimate details of client sessions on TikTok can lead clients to recognizing themselves and experiencing a breach of trust, even if the therapist claims to keep it anonymous. But I think I hear a POI, so I'll take your question.
Oh, sorry, I said POC. I just wanted to
Okay.
ask the tagline of your C2.
It is privacy.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, resuming time. Those sorts of specific, intimate details of client sessions on TikTok can lead to clients recognizing themselves and experiencing a breach of trust, even if the therapist claims to keep it anonymous. And many have created content based off in session conversations, with some using social media consent forms to justify using client stories for online engagement. And the short form model of videos online on TikTok rewards hyper-specific details that engage viewers at the client's expense. It also really negatively impacts therapists and reduces the actual reach of professionals. There have been cases where therapists have faced serious consequences for sharing sensitive or inappropriate content, including being terminated or receiving backlash for complaining about trauma dumping clients. All of that means that not only do people seek out therapists less, but for the therapists who are actually posting on TikTok, they often get cases filed against them, which means that they can no longer operate in a professional sense. For all of those reasons, we have never been prouder to stand on the proposition.
Thank you. Okay. Again, great thanks to our five judges having listened us through the terrible cold and through this entire day. And my time will start on three, two, one. I don't know how many people in this room are TikTok users, but I'd estimate there are at least 6 or 7 of you. Okay, anyways, we agree with the opponent's definitions, but we reject their fact on they saying, oh, we only regret the advice, which doesn't really make sense. They already made it really clear in their definitions that promotion of mental health influencers means that you're only promoting the rapidly growing number of mental health professionals and mental health content creators on the platform. This is something they give to you verbatim and not specifically reject the advice. This is non-topical. We also reject the fact that they say we support short form videos in general, because by definition, this doesn't make sense. Again, you can upload 10 minutes of videos to TikTok. This is again non-topical. And third of all, we are not defending TikTok. We'd argue TikTok exists in either world. The only uniqueness on the opposition is we have this rise of mental health professionals and mental health content creators as defined by the government in the TikTok app. Right now, moving on to our contentions. On contention one, leads to more people seeking out actual therapy. Right? And this is a net good as defined as by government. This seems to contradict what the government is telling you, but here are 4 concrete reasons why it's true. First of all, the demystification of therapy. For many, therapy is an intimidating and opaque process. They don't really know what's going on. Therapy as a term is inherently vague. What does it mean? What does it really do? Fear of the unknown. This isn't extreme, but it's enough to keep people from ever going to therapy. Therapy talk demystifies that. They know what it is, they're more likely to go. It's simple. It's a fact of simple human psychology. Second, destigmatization of therapy. Many people have the stigma against therapy. Why? Because this is a thing we don't see often. Normally, like 20 years ago, people don't want to openly say that they go to therapy because some people in this world find it very interesting. We don't want to necessarily say people think therapy is bad, but there is stigma that we cannot ignore. Therapy talk puts a human face on mental health, on mental health issues. In many cultures and families, therapy is still seen as something for crazy people or a sign of weakness, which is obviously not true. When a user sees something reliable or a successful influencer talking about their therapist or their diagnosis, it breaks down that shame. This transforms therapy from the scary medical procedure into a lifestyle for self-improvement. And what are the benefits? Less stigma means this is always good because it stops people from being afraid of going to therapy, and it also creates a community within therapy itself. When you see other people in the same situation as you realize maybe my situation isn't as bad as it seems, leads to more people seeking out. And third, the bridge. People can feel bad, but they don't know why. Oh dear, my ears are falling off. Their lack of words and terminology to explain their pain to a professional stops them from doing so. A patient who enters a real therapy office saying, oh, I think I'm struggling with burnout and boundary settings because of TikTok I saw, is much further along than someone who says, I feel bad, because even if that's wrong, the therapist can correct them from there. Furthermore, many therapists on TikTok also include this in their disclaimer. This is not a substitution for therapy. It causes more people to be able to get more effective therapy. And fourth, the reminder. This is a simple warning. Simple. People don't realize therapy exists as an option until they see it on a therapy talk. They might not even ever think of seeking out the option. Increased screen time is also correlated with increased demands for therapy. So we're literally placing a reminder exactly where the demand is. These are all individual and independent warrants in the eyes of anyone who seeks out therapy or needs therapy. Thus, the government side will have to respond to every single warrant in order for us contention not to apply. The bottom line is we agree that professional therapy is better than TikTok therapy. Well, obviously no argument, but TikTok therapy is what actually causes actual therapy to happen more in the first place. And the fact is, that's why you see more and more people going to professional therapy. And on our contention to advertisements to actual therapists, we see both sides winning in this case, therapists and the people who desire therapy. A lot of the warrants are the same, but there are also new warrants in this argument, which is essentially that therapists have another avenue to advertise, right? They make this, actually, I'll respond to their arguments in my rebuttal, right? One of the hardest parts for a therapist is for the first or 3 to 5 clients. They need more clients. Many clients lack mental health literacy. Therapists can act as a teacher before they can act as a healer. Therapy Talk provides slightly more education to people who watch it, making their labor feel more rewarding. And again, this also leads to more people going to therapists in the first place, which means they have access to more clients, essentially. The therapist online can then make more money. Therapy becomes a more popular job and leads to more the supply of therapy as well. And again, I think we don't need to talk about why therapy is good. This case, just take the gov's impacting and substitute it into ours. Empirically, again, we've seen rise in therapy because of this. Now, moving on to rebuttals against the government side's contentions. On their first contention, which is worsening the current mental health issues, there are a few responses to this. First of all, there is TikTok, they say that there are misdiagnoses, which, again, drop the statistic they use because these statistics are often really biased and incredibly varied by source. And by this law of our tournament, we can't really verify it or provide another source, right? And then second response on the misdiagnosis response, no link at all. Nothing the opponent characterizes in this debate as videos attempt to diagnose people. It's just more people relating to therapy on TikTok doesn't mean more diagnosis videos. Instead, professional therapists try their best not to make it seem like they're teaching their constituents how to diagnose themselves, because the point is they want people to come to them for professional therapy. And second, we turn their response on misdiagnosis because this actually leads to more people seeking out professional help. Even if they have an incorrect premise, they go to a professional in order to verify that premise, because that's just how people works. If they have a hypothesis, they want to confirm that hypothesis. This again leads to more people going to professional therapy in the first place. And then on their subpoint B, which is worsening the current mental health crisis, this is non-topical because their link to this is the doom scrolling cycle. We do not defend TikTok. Doom scrolling happens on either side. This seems like a canned argument from a PF case. Just drop this entire subpoint. It's non-topical. And on to their third argument, which is treatment misuse. This is, again, sort of non-topical. Why? Because the rise of therapy influencers definitely does not include the rise of chugging drug challenges. That is definitely not something under the opposition side's banner. Now, on to their second contention, which is privacy. They say that you raise ethical concerns by therapists posting videos of their therapy sessions. Again, that's simply illegal. Therapists are legally not allowed to like have a video of their therapy sessions and post it online, especially without consent. And even so, it's literally not allowed in the field. It's just not how therapy works. Actual cases you see on TikToks are probably recreated skits. And then the government gives this really great warranting, in my opinion. They say not only do people seek out therapists less, therapists who are not professional cannot operate, which doesn't really make sense because that exactly solves the problem. We don't agree with the fact that people seek out therapists less, they seek out therapists more, but we agree with the fact that therapists that cannot maintain a professional stance and post their videos to TikTok should not be allowed to operate, right? It solves their entire case. But again, these are two separate responses, so they still have to respond to each one individually. And with that, I am very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Gail Salem. I'm the second speaker for the government. If everyone's ready, I'll begin my 8-minute speech. Perfect. Oh, for our off-time roadmap, I'll quickly first be going over their case and then going back to our case. So sorry about that. So first on their case, we agree with most of their definitions, except for their definition of what is actually falling under today's resolution. They tell you that it's pretty much anything related to therapy or mental health that circulates on TikTok. But we disagree because today's resolution specifically talks about therapy talk, which directly talks about therapy influencers. So specifically, it's going to be videos like from channels that specifically promote content about therapy to try to spread information. So it doesn't include any kind of video where it's just an average person just talking about their own mental health experience, because that's not specifically therapy talk. That's not anyone related to therapy specifically sharing advice on therapy, which doesn't fall under today's resolution. Now, on to their first contention of therapy talk leading to a rise of people seeking out therapy. But we have 3 reasons why that simply isn't true. First of all, I tell you that seeing more people go to therapy isn't necessarily a direct impact of therapy talk. We've seen in the past few years that therapy and mental health issues have been increasingly destigmatized, but it's not because of TikTok itself. It's because newer generations and more research has fueled the rise of destigmatization of mental health issues. It's not because of TikTok itself. It's just because as a society as a whole, we're moving towards destigmatization. It's not because of therapy talk. For example, governments are investing more into increasing mental health awareness. Actually qualified therapists are starting to spread their information more. It's not because of therapy that people are learning more about it's not because of therapy TikTok that people are learning more about mental health. It's specifically because as a society as a whole, more funding, more research is being poured into these issues because as a society we've acknowledged that it is something that needs to be done. But our second reason why a rise of actual therapy does not happen is because when people start self-diagnosing, which we've seen empirically, you get this idea that you know exactly what's happening to you. For example, if I believe I have ADHD based on this one video that I see, I'm going to start thinking that, oh, I do have ADHD. I don't necessarily have to go to a doctor to confirm that because I specifically believe that that video has been sufficient proof. So if people, I'll take your point.
Why wouldn't you go to a doctor to confirm it if you think you have ADHD and you want to solve it?
Clearly, empirically, we've seen people not do that because people are relying on self-diagnoses. So if 25% of people are reporting that they're self-diagnosing themselves, that clearly means that they haven't taken the step to actually go get a diagnosis. So clearly it shows that for those 25% of people who diagnose themselves, it's pretty clear that they haven't taken that step of actually finding real therapy. They're only relying on their own self-judgment, which is really, really bad, but people do it. People aren't always the most logical, unfortunately. The third reason why this happens is, or the third reason why destigmatization doesn't directly correlate to TikTok is because we have to understand that videos talking about mental health issues aren't under today's resolution. Like we said in our first speech, like if a random beauty TikToker just talks about how they've been struggling with depression, that's not exactly considered therapy talk because they're not necessarily trying to spread advice of any kind. They're just talking about their own experiences. That's what's driving destigmatization as well. It's just people talking about their own experiences, which isn't under today's resolution because it's not specifically trying to provide advice or trying to convince people of anything or anything like that. They're just talking about their own experiences specifically, which is not under today's resolution. onto their second contention of advertising. They tell you that TikTok is really good for allowing therapists to advertise more. But like we said from our first speech, 91% of the therapy TikTokers on TikTok are not licensed whatsoever. So I'd say if if most people on Therapy Talk are advertising and most people on Therapy Talk aren't licensed, then we're just having unqualified people advertise their own therapy means. That's led to a lot of like misinformation about what therapy actually is. A lot of people start buying into programs that don't necessarily that aren't necessarily scientifically proven, but just because they saw on therapy. So I'd argue that this advertising is actually bad because you're actually advertising means of therapy that aren't scientifically proven and can actually worsen mental health issues or just worsen physical health in general. Onto our case. Again, we'd like to reestablish that this is specific. This resolution specifically talks about therapy talk from therapy influencers. So again, just general talk about mental health experiences don't fall under today's resolution. On our first contention of decreasing the average mental health. Again, we tell you that misinformation is rampant on therapy talk, but they pretty much just don't respond to this whatsoever. Again, we provide you that statistic that 83% of information on therapy talk is just completely misinformation. So I'd say that if a lot of the information that people are hearing about mental health in general is wrong, that doesn't allow them to actually get mental health help because everything they're hearing simply isn't true. But then onto our sub point that it leads to a lot of misdiagnosis. They tell you that just videos about mental health don't cause people to misdiagnose. So they tell you that the warranting isn't there. But understand that a lot of the videos that people are seeing are like checkbox videos. A lot of videos might have the format of like, oh hey, if you do these 3 things, you might have autism, because that's what gets clicks. That's what gets virality on social media, which is specific to TikTok, because that everyone is trying to get their videos to go viral and not necessarily to spread information. So pretty much self-diagnosis does happen because all the videos that are being promoted are extreme videos that cause people to watch them. People like hearing about their own experiences. People will watch those checkbox videos, which is why we've seen an increase in misdiagnosis empirically. And then onto our point of doom scrolling. They tell you that it's non-unique because there's doom scrolling on both sides of the prop and the opposition. But we tell you that doom scrolling is specifically unique when you talk about therapy TikTok, because therapy TikTok is specifically talking about your own mental health issues, and you might start thinking that the information that you're receiving is helping you. Therefore, you're going to keep scrolling. For example, if I start watching a lot of random videos on something completely irrelevant to my life, I'm going to try to stop my doom scrolling. But if I see videos that seem educational and seem to inform me about my own mental health issues, I might not realize that it is doom scrolling. Instead, I will think it is educational for myself in some way and keep watching those videos. That's why doom scrolling is unique to our side. Onto our subpoint C of misuse of treatment. They tell you that we don't see those crazy challenges of people just misusing their prescriptions, but we literally have. It's rampant on TikTok, and it's empirically been seen that these challenges have been implemented. I'm not just making up these challenges. I wouldn't be able to make them up myself. It's pretty clear that a lot of these TikTokers do post misinformation in that way, and they have big incentive to post these extremist videos because it makes them money. Again, like we said from our first speech, people get the most clicks when they post things that are polarizing. Therefore, if you make some really polarizing content about how to use your prescription, you're going to get a lot more clicks. That's why the rise of information from TikTok specifically has been filled so much with misinformation, because people are driven by clicks and not driven by actually trying to help people. To our second contention of privacy. They tell us that it's not legal, therefore it just doesn't happen, but clearly it has happened. People have broken those legal barriers. And while we agree that it's really, really bad, the rise of TikTok has incentivized people to post things like this because, again, they want to get more clicks, they want to get more views. That's why specifically the rise of TikTok has incentivized people to do these illegal acts. That's why we're so proud to stand on the opposition, or on the proposition. Thank you.
Hey, Joel. Joel or panel, could I just get 30 seconds?
Oh,
Sure.
Okay, good to go.
Awesome. Just quick introduction again. My name is Jane Hu. I'm going to be the second speaker for opposition. Off-time roadmap, if that's okay with anyone. Okay. I'm going to begin with the top of case, and then I'll start off with government's contentions, and then I'll move into our case. And that'll begin on my first word. One thing that we like to first talk about is kind of like what direction we're going with this motion, right? The government side tries to tell us that like mental health isn't, shouldn't be considered under this. But we think that therapists, one of the biggest, like most important parts of therapy therapists is to help with mental health, right? So we think that while of course, if random social media influencers, like for example, if you're talking about like fashion and they start talking about mental health, that doesn't apply. But we still have to realize that a majority of mental health related content is all made by therapy influencers, right? Because mental health falls right under therapy and therapy itself. So we think that still anything related to mental health, as long as it's from the therapy influencers, absolutely does fall into this case. And also they try and tell us how we just have to remind you once again that short form videos are not the only thing that exists on TikTok, right? There's also up to 10-minute videos. So anything that they really say about how like 15-second algorithm, 15-second videos are like harmful in a sense, just don't throw that in because there's a lot more other kinds of videos that are being put in as well. So with that, let's move on to their first contention, which is worsening the current mental health issue. Let's start with their subpoint A, which is misdiagnosis. First of all, let's say this. Let's drop the statistic, okay? These usually, especially because we're on TikTok and social media, these are very, very biased, okay? I could create a TikTok account now, right? And put it under, yeah, it could just, it's very, very biased and very, very, varies by source. So they try and tell you with this 83% of videos being misinformed, just don't really take that into consideration. But then let's compare the two, right? Would you rather have a person who's completely struggling and unaware of what they're happening or have some kind of idea, right? So they try and tell you how the most polarizing videos are usually the ones that go most viral. But when you think about it, there's a comment section, right? People comment. They can comment on whether or not this content is real to begin with. And then if, the poster turns off the comments, you automatically know like they're receiving they don't like the opposing information that's coming at them, right? So we see that polarizing content you can recognize that and can see like, oh, this isn't actually true. Okay. And then moving on to negative, they say this negatively impacts mental health. Doesn't necessarily, because obviously there's people that are like checking it, whether it's right or wrong. And they also like dramatic information is likely to circulate. But you know what else is also likely to circulate? Truthful content, right? Content that actually helps people. People spreading false information can be held accountable. Hence, comment sections, stitches, and people are especially more held accountable nowadays on social media, right? Not just TikTok themselves. And then they also say because these videos are so short, they have like the opportunity to misdiagnose themselves. They give this example of autism for like trauma issues. I'm actually quite familiar with this process. My sister is autistic, so when there are different intensities of autism, but you need an actual diagnosis for this. So just saying that you have autism, to be honest, nobody's really going to take that seriously unless you have an actual diagnosis. On the other hand, therapy talk is going to tell you like, oh, if you're feeling upset, maybe this, like for example, X is what you're feeling, right? And you can think that way. So then you can reach out to seek professional help to confirm if that's true or not. Okay, they also tell you how, moving up to their subpoint, at the end of subpoint A, they give you once again another statistic. 91% of professionals lack, they're unqualified basically. And once again, this is a statistic with really, it's coming from a biased source. We can't really prove whether or not that's actually true, especially because we are online. Moving on to B, they talk about worsening the current mental health crisis. They talk about doom scrolling. And I find it very interesting because on both worlds, this happens regardless, okay? If you're not doom scrolling on, let's say therapy talk, you could be doom scrolling on a different kind of TikTok, right? It doesn't matter because regardless, doom scrolling will exist. So then when they try and tell you how, all of these bad things happen because of doom scrolling on Therapy Talk, this will happen regardless. And we're telling you that it's really it's not going to happen as prevalent, okay? They also say teens watching these videos will like result to more FOMO, but no, at the end of the day, it doesn't happen, okay? TikTok therapy videos don't teach them like the fear of missing out. It doesn't happen. So my partner says that this is not, they also bring up how, they take improbably used medicine, they chug a ton of medicine. Once again, my partner says the rise of therapy influencers definitely do not include like the rise of chugging drug challenges, right? The second speaker doesn't actually reply to that. They drop this point entirely. Moving on to their second contention, which is privacy. They talk about raising ethical concerns and how like people can post videos online. And then my partner very helpfully rebuts that this is a legal thing. But then their second speaker just says that, oh, people have broken legal barriers and that this is like because they can get so much money, they are incentivized to do these acts. So we think that this is pretty unrealistic, okay? If you are doing something illegal, you're like the person that you are like having the therapy session with can very much report you, okay? So not only do you lose your license, you basically lose your form of income, okay? So this is really bad for the therapists themselves. And therefore, we think that this is just, even though it may exist, it's a very, very small number of people, so small that it basically just is minuscule, okay? So posting people is not necessarily going to be this like super, super big thing because of all of the terrible consequences, okay? And then they also tell you how people stop seeking out therapists and things like that. We don't really see a reason why people would stop seeking out therapists because what they're doing is illegal, okay? So as long as you know that the person you're working with is somebody who can be trusted and knowing that, a normal person, a rational person would not be, posting these private sessions online, then you should be okay. You would still go once again to seek out for help. Moving on to the opposition's case, our case, contention 1 leads to more people seeking out actual therapy. Okay, so they try and tell you how seeing more people going to therapy is not because of TikTok, okay? We acknowledge a part of this, but government literally doesn't respond to any of our 4 links. Our 4 links, demystification of therapy, destigmatization of therapy, the bridge, and also the reminder. So those are the things that the government side actually just doesn't respond to, which means they literally concede the fact that therapy talk likely plays a very high role in this trend. We also quote from Gov, it's because actually qualified therapists are spreading information more. And that's exactly what therapy TikTok is about, right? Qualified therapists spreading their work. And they also say like actual therapy doesn't happen because of self-diagnosis. Their only link to self-diagnosis is based on empirically, okay? We can't confirm these stats, prefer actual argumentations and warrants instead of like these meaningless stats. They also talk about destigmatization. Our opponent's destigmatization rebuttal is basically the link that this link is that because more information online, more people are visible. They tell you that it doesn't work, but it does, because when more people see other people maybe struggling with the same things that they're struggling, they will feel much more safer. Okay, moving on to our second contention, which is advertisement to actual therapists. They say 91% are licensed, things like that. Once again, don't take that stat. We have unqualified TikTok. So they don't actually say how these people in real life are not actually being benefited, right? Even if it's, again, they say these aren't like scientifically proven methods, but even if it's true, we still outweigh on people, right? We're still helping more people, and we're still helping these therapists make money in other means. And for all those reasons, I'm so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone ready? Good. Okay, my time starts on 3, 2, 1. Starting off, I have to admit, I don't particularly like the clashing in this debate, because a lot of the clashing here is literally Gov telling us, oh, it happened, look towards the empiric, which again, we tell you don't buy for 2 reasons. Why? Because first of all, these statistics are often really biased and incredibly varied by source. If you don't believe me, go on Google and you'll see 20 different stats for things our opponents tell you. Second is literally by tournament rules, we are not allowed to verify any of these stats, which means our opponents probably cherry-picked all of these statistics. statistics. Thus, you would rather prefer our logical, clear analysis and reasoning of the round, since the above reasons were dropped in the MG, don't allow them to defend it in the PMR. Thus, we just wipe out all their arguments that don't go again. Additionally, please wipe out all the arguments that don't go against the gov sides of the and mine's definition. We both agreed that the only thing the rise is on is, by their definition, therapy influence, which are mental health professionals and mental health content creators, not the rise of short form itself, not the rise of hugging drug challenges. Literally, by the motion, the rise of influence, professional therapy influence, professional mental health professionals, and mental health content creators. Thus, drop part 2 and part 3 of their first contention on their side. Additionally, drop the privacy point. Why? Because at best, this is a wash on both sides. Because we told you literally that it's illegal, and they just said it's not true. And then Jane tells you that that's not true. And at worst, turn this for us because they dropped our second response, the turn to the fact that if therapists lose their jobs for malpractice and posting bad things, that's actually good because we are removing bad therapists from the pool. Thus, we actually end up with 2 major ballots in this round. First is misinformation and misdiagnosis, things I grouped together. 2 things under this. First, again, they dropped our turn that even if you have marginal misinformation, that leads to people more likely to seek out therapists because of the human nature tendency to want to verify a hypothesis. If I think I may be struggling from ADHD, it's more likely for me to seek out a mental health professional because then I can actually get help and verify my hypothesis. There was no responses at all to this turn, so don't mind me doing POOs in their PMR. And second of all, as Jane said, these are mental health professionals and mental health content creators by their definition who actively remove misinformation because misinformation actively harms their account because it decreases the people who think they are credible, thus decreasing the amount of people watching their stories. Now, the second ballot is the number of people who actually seek out professional therapy. The biggest response here from the gov we hear is that, oh, it's not because of TikTok, it's because of other factors in the modern society, right? That doesn't really rule out TikTok. Just because other factors exist doesn't mean TikTok is still a big factor. Just take Jane's response that we acknowledge this, but that doesn't mean that TikTok isn't a big thing. They don't respond to any of our 4 warrants directly, which means they concede the fact that therapy talk likely plays a very high role in this round. We have a gov quote as well. It's because actually qualified therapists are spreading their information more. And how is that happening? Through TikTok. That's exactly what therapy talk is about. Again, don't mind me doing POOs later. Thus, in the end, the only thing you have on opposition side is increased doom scrolling. I tell you this is a wash because they tell you it happens because you're more likely to feel sentimental and feel like you're like actually helping yourself, which doesn't really make sense. It's not how the human mind works. TikTok attracts us for many different, for other independent reasons, including the dopamine boost. Learning information doesn't actually lead to that. Take my partner Jane's rebuttal that this doesn't actually happen, and at best take this as a wash. Thus, you vote for us for one simple reason. More people seek out professional therapy on our side. Why is this? Because they want to verify their hypotheses and they have to. These 4 warrants, look back to our case, they're pretty clearly numbered. All these 4 reasons lead to more people seeking out professional therapy. And at best, that number factually outweighs everything the government has to tell you, because more people seeking out therapy just means more people getting help. This could be perhaps life-saving because a lot of these mental health issues are something that are best solved early, which is something only we can provide. Thus, with that, I urge an alt ballot. Thank you.
Great speech. Okay. So once more, my name is Tegan Bolt. I will be the 3rd speaker for the proposition for Cary Academy. Order will just be starting on definitions, and then I'll go into a few questions that should guide your ballot today. Is anybody not ready? Perfect. Then time will start on my first word. Okay, so what we're talking about today is therapy talk and whether or not this house regrets it. We define therapy talk specifically as mental health professionals, amateurs providing advice regarding the mental health crisis. That's fundamentally what therapy is, and that's fundamentally what therapy talk is. It's trying to provide advice. So when we're evaluating today's debate, there's a couple of questions you need to ask yourself. One is, who is affected by therapy talk? We find that it's largely young teens and adults, and that's because those people are the ones most likely to be online. At the same time, we also know that these people are much more prone to misinformation because your brain isn't fully developed yet, which is why we see higher rates of things like misdiagnoses among teens. Sure, what's your...
POO. Oh, my POO is the argument that young people and young adults are more likely and more prone to misinformation is a completely new warranted argument. That
was in our case, but I'll leave that to judges' discretion. Okay. The second question you need to ask yourself is who is on Therapy Talk and who is doing these promotions? And another follow-up to that, why are they doing it? Okay, we tell you that it's largely a lot of people who are not certified, and that's because this algorithm rewards people for clickbait, and they're fundamentally doing it for money, which is why we see an increase in just crazy misinformation on the internet, because that's what gets views, and that's why we find that there's a lot of misdiagnoses happening. They try and just get out of this by saying it's a stat, which means that you can't buy it, but they fundamentally just use that as a cover-up that doesn't actually take into account our warrants. We tell you that people are more prone to spread misinformation on therapy TikTok because it gets them more clicks. And what does more clicks get them? More money. That's why misdiagnoses are so high right now. Okay, then another point that you can just flow really cleanly to the op is the fact that they've conceded that when you have people self-diagnosing, that means that they're less likely to seek out therapy. A lot of people say, one, therapy is bad. That's been in our case since the beginning. And two, that makes people think that they know everything about the mental health condition that they have, which is why we see less people go to therapy. But one major thing here, let's go to what they said in their last speech. They told you that it's illegal to post online. We agree with that fundamentally, but what therapists are doing, because they're so incentivized by money, is they're posting online pictures of their clients, they're posting online stories that are too personal to their clients, and that's getting them terminated. That's a fundamental turn on every single aspect of their case, because they themselves told you that people having this like illegal terminalization of them means that there's a decrease in mental health professionals. They said that was a good thing, but ask yourself, if we're seeing a decrease in mental health professionals, how are we ever even going to see people going to therapists to get diagnoses? Even if you want to buy their entire case, at the point that you know that privacy concerns are terminating the number of therapists, you know that people fundamentally cannot go to therapists to get diagnosed. That's really, really clean. You can immediately vote for the op there, because we're the only side that actually protects mental health professionals and keeps them in their jobs, because Therapy Talk just incentivizes clickbait misdiagnoses that take people away from actually seeking out mental health professionals. That's why the mental health crisis is so bad right now. It's a clean off ballot right there. But let's go specifically onto some more line by line here. On our case regarding misdiagnoses, they just try and say that people are like not going to be susceptible to this kind of thing. But remember, teenagers, young adults, our brains aren't fully developed. We're going to be more susceptible to these misdiagnoses. And we also know that the sort of algorithm that rewards it is these checkbox sorts of videos that just have people frame into it. And the algorithm just promotes and promotes these videos, which makes people so certain in what they know that it makes them not seek out mental health professionals, and also promotes more negative issues, because obviously we can both agree doom scrolling is bad, and Therapy Talk is fundamentally amplifying that. Okay, then let's go onto their case. Let's go start on their C1. Just extend the fact that they tell you that there's a community created within, and that's exactly why we see that people are more reliant on therapy TikTok than actually going to a therapist, because they think they found this online space online that substitutes for real mental health awareness. It doesn't. That's where you vote op. Then on their C2 regarding advertising, we would just say that it increases credibility, and you can extend our privacy argument here. But yeah, what's your POI?
Your response to the community point is completely new because it wasn't responded to before.
It's a cross application of our contention, so I would say it's not new.
Which one?
On your community within, it's a cross application
of which contention?
Of our contention regarding misdiagnoses. Yeah, I think I have like 10 seconds left. Okay. So just to clear up the round for you, it's really, really clean. You know that voting for the prop fundamentally decreases the amount of therapists available. Even if you want to buy their entire case, it's a turn there. It's a really clean off ballot. Good round, y'all.
Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Good job. Okay, we'll come back in a few minutes. Well, as many minutes as
you need.
Yeah.
Hey, it looks like all the ballots are in. And it is a actually, do we have both teams here? Everybody's here, right? Okay. It's a 4-1 decision for the opposition Princeton. And it's traditional for the squirrel to give the first. Congratulations to both teams. Excellent debate. Very impressive you got here. Very impressive job in the round. We will give our oral RFDs now, and it's traditional for the squirrel to go first, and the squirrel in this round is Mark Bodnick. So Mark, would you like to say anything?
Sure. So I feel like this round was sort of a description of what was happening in maybe 3 steps, which is what's happening on TikTok, and then what's happening to what people are learning and how they're being impacted by the content on TikTok. And then are they being routed effectively to therapists? Maybe it's 2 steps. And I felt like I understand that the evidence statistics are not really usable per the rules, but I felt like the logic of the focus on virality leading to bad polarizing content and that damaging consumers in Gov's first argument was very compelling and not addressed. I didn't think we don't I don't think TikTok is more than just short form videos was a compelling refutation. So I just thought the virality argument, the virality motives equals bad content was very compelling. I didn't care about the privacy argument, which I agree was a wash. I understand that Gov didn't do a good enough job of responding to Neg 1, but I wasn't convinced that more people were in fact seeking good therapy on the basis of what Op said. So at the end of the day, I was most convinced by Af's first argument, but clearly I'm in the minority.
I'll go next. I voted for op. The first thing that I resolve is framework. On the clash regarding empirics, I buy the neg here. The idea that I ought to reject empirics in favor of link chains goes virtually uncontested, and it's extended through the LOC to the LOR. The framework debate on what a therapy influencer isn't extended through the rebuttal speeches, and so I don't know what to do with this other than to call it a wash. On to the line by line, I think affirmative is correct in calling negs disadvantage 1 non-unique. I don't get enough defense for me to consider this disadvantage completely wiped out, and so I give neg the benefit of the doubt here, off of the conceded links that TikTok probably played a part in destigmatizing therapy. Neg is winning that there are more people going to therapy in neg world, both through destigmatization and through popularization of mental health discussion. On misinformation, I think that AF is clearly winning here. All of the stuff on profit incentive flows cleanly through. Neg tries to contest this a bit, particularly in the MO, but I think that this comes too late. I'm really unsure as to how TikTok is correcting for misinformation according to the neg. I get that comments exist and that commentators will often stitch videos that are inaccurate, but I also get that people who post misinformation will occasionally block the comments on their post. I think this puts neg in kind of a double bind that isn't really called out by the AF, so I guess whatever. Even in the case where AF wins, there is misinformation being perpetuated. Neg, has basically a sequencing argument here in the LOR that the misinformation that is being perpetuated doesn't actually matter because more people are seeking out professional help, which is going to correct for the misinformation. At this point, I pull the trigger and I submit my ballot for neg on the idea that destigmatization is promoting people seeking professional help, and that destigmatization is prior to misinformation because destigmatization leads to people seeking professional care. This ballot was especially hard for me to make, and I think this is because neither team collapses. It means that I have to do the work for you in many ways, which serves as an advantage to no one in the round. The MO should be effectively collapsing, and the PMR should as well. I don't want to have this many sheets by the end of my flow, and I especially don't want to be left picking which one is the most important based on how I feel. You invite judge intervention by not collapsing, and I think that I should have heard quite a bit more weighing in both of the rebuttal speeches, and that could have potentially changed my ballot.
Okay, I'll go next. And it's funny. I think that my RFD, I think about the round in a way that is very similar to what Penelope just said. I think my reasons for decisions are very similar, but I think the RFD is going to sound pretty different because it'll be basically well, she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it'll be kind of a lay version of the more technical RFD that you just heard. So I think the first thing that I think needed to, well, actually, let me just say overall that I thought the debating was good in this round, but there were lots and lots of places where a speaker was not engaging with a warranting of the other side, which made it much harder for me to evaluate the argument. Sometimes there was clash on the warranting, sometimes there wasn't, but there were a lot of places where, especially on the gov side, they would respond to an op argument and not attack the analysis that went behind the argument, which caused me to extend the op argument. And that happened a lot, although the op did that too. And I'll probably note some places where that happened. So in terms of how I think about my decision, the first thing that we have to figure out, which I really would have liked everybody to spend more time on, was what is therapy talk? The definition in the PMC wasn't entirely clear, and I feel like the back and forth wasn't really very focused. I mean, I think ultimately Gov does a better job here by saying therapy talk is mental health professionals who are influencers. So therefore, we should focus only on things that involve what the influencers are putting out there. Now, it doesn't quite line up with their arguments because, as Op points out, things like the drug challenges, like go off of drugs or take lots of drugs or whatever, it's not clear that that's something that mental health professionals are doing. It's also not clear that it's really limited to, I mean, I think there's not a lot of explanation for why influencers are necessarily mental health professionals. Like, why can't a teenager who is talking about her mental health struggles, why can't that person be an influencer? I don't know. Op doesn't really do a lot on the definition, so I go with a gov definition that we're just talking about whatever's put out there by influencers, which is not necessarily just advice. But I do buy the basic definition given by the government that we're talking about the content put out there by influencers, and I guess I buy their assertion because it's not really refuted by the op that the content is generally that the influencers are generally mental health professionals. So at least we have something to work with here, but I think everybody should have spent more time being really clear. What is therapy talk? Who are the influencers? What is the content that we're debating about? Because that's the only way that we can evaluate the arguments that are made in the round. So now that we know what therapy talk is, I should say, as one of the people involved in the creation of the NPDL rule that this tournament follows, I think and one of the tournament directors, I think I'm obliged to follow the announced rule, which I'm totally fine with. So I do not give any weight to citations to published sources. I'm looking for analysis for why, and I thought Opt did a better job overall giving me analysis for why things are true instead of just giving me statistics. And I realize it's hard because there are certain empirical claims that are really difficult to verify. I mean, we don't, in this room, we can't survey what the content is on TikTok. So if somebody has studied that, I can understand why you'd want to tell us that somebody's surveyed all the content that's out there and 82% of it is X or Y or whatever. But given the fact that we can't really verify it, I have to look at the analysis and I want to look at the analysis. Okay, so, and here's where I think my reason for decision is quite similar to Penelope's, which is that I do, on balance, go with Gov that there's a lot of misinformation on therapy talk, though I do note the ops argument that well, okay, so one of the lenses that I look at this through is the idea that there are going to be good actors and bad actors on. There's going to be some mix of good and some mix of bad, some mix of like good mental health professionals who actually know what they're doing, and other people who are either licensed and are just interested in making a buck or unlicensed or whatever. So there's going to be some good advice out there and there's going to be some bad advice out there. I don't know exactly what the mix is. I think Gov is right that there's going to be at least a substantial amount of bad advice out there. So Gov is winning that. But I think where Op really wins the round is their argument that people are going to, even if they get bad advice, and Op does also have the argument, obviously, that the good actors are going to be careful about their advice and they're going to want to have good reputations and all that. So I certainly buy there's a lot of good advice and good content out there, but there's also going to be a lot of bad stuff out there. I think that's intuitive. It sounds like that's where Mark voted, that we know what social media is like and it's kind of a sewer. But given that, Op tells me that when you watch a video that says, if you have these three characteristics, you may be autistic or whatever, somebody who watches that video and believes it is going to say, okay, sounds like maybe I'm autistic. What do I do now? And what they're going to do now is go talk to a mental health professional. And if they've gotten good information, then they're off to the races. And if they've gotten bad information on TikTok, then that gets corrected by the mental health professional. So I don't really, I hear Gov pushing back about this, but I don't really get any analysis there. The argument in the PMC, which is basically repeated in MG and PMR, is people get advice on the internet and they stop there. But I don't really hear a lot of analysis as to why, and I get much more analysis on the op as to why they would then. What op never says explicitly is, even if you have a diagnosis, you still don't know what your treatment is, and you're going to go to a mental health professional for your treatment. Would have been very helpful if op had said that, but even without saying that, they do give me a lot of reasons for why somebody is going to want to know more if they have some kind of self-diagnosis they get from TikTok. So they're going to mental health professionals, and everybody agrees that going to mental health professionals is good and makes mental health better and is the impact that everybody's fighting over. So op is basically winning that impact. The only thing that Gov has left there is what I think is the weakest Gov argument, but they do push it in PMR, which is to say, well, but we're hemorrhaging mental health professionals because all of these people are breaking. We have a whole bunch of criminal mental health professionals who are breaking the law and having their licenses revoked. So there aren't enough therapists to go for these people who have curiosity to go to anymore out in the real world. I really don't think that's a very good argument. I think it's very effectively responded to by op, because first of all, op says therapy talk encourages lots of other people to go into mental health. So there's a substantial supply. And also, I just have a really hard time with, I'm very sympathetic to the op argument that if we have these bad actors and they're getting their licenses revoked, Gov's telling me that's a problem. I don't see that as a problem. I see that as a system working and increasing the quality of mental health advice that is available from mental health professionals. So I'm not really worried about supply, and I see the quality of real world advice going up because the bad actors are getting caught. There's a lot of other stuff I could have said here. Like, obviously, if they're breaking the law, they're doing it very publicly. This is not something that's that hard to figure out if they're revealing all kinds of identifying information. So the system is working. Bad actors are getting caught, and that seems like a good thing to me. So we have lots of people who are now going to see that it's getting destigmatized. I buy that argument, demystified. So lots of people are going out and seeking mental health advice from real therapists. That seems like a really good thing. And so to me, the offense that op is giving me is much stronger than the offense that Gov is giving me. And I think that's kind of where I vote. So good job all around. And I hope that makes sense. And I'm probably going to take off because we do need to go deal with finals. But congratulations to both teams.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that RFT as well.
Yeah, the tournament was awesome too.
Then Mr. Berkowitz.
Yeah, I'll go really quick. As a non-technical judge, it comes down to one question: in which world are more people going to seek therapy? It's kind of confounded by the fact that the people seeking therapy may be needing therapy because of the technology that we're talking about. But we're talking about a very specific subset of that, which is the therapy talk itself. And regardless of the definitions around that varied and honestly was irrelevant because if that's what it takes to reach people, that's what it takes to reach people, and that was kind of pretty clear. So that's kind of why I voted as I did because that was the world where more people are seeking therapy, and I think that both sides agreed the world they wanted to live was that where people would seek therapy, and I think they made a more causal argument in that regard. Stacey?
Yeah, so I'm just going to only try to highlight things that are different, and I think that mine is different. I thought Princeton did an excellent job. I don't think they went far enough, as Penelope said. I think you could have done better, right? But I think it was strategic because you didn't want to have to draw it out, and I can tell. Do me a favor, don't eat in a round. Okay, Melvin? Thank you. I would appreciate that. Um, Government did a great job, but I mean, this is like really high up in a tournament, and there's a tournament rule, and the government had time to prepare a case. And I really do take into consideration the rules of evidence, and it was effectively rebutted as well. So I didn't have to take that into consideration because the rebuttal of what you said was actually the rule of evidence as well, and I take that very seriously. And I think that factored into my a little bit of my decision here. The other thing I had is that regarding polarization, the op actually did say something about that. And they talked about how, one of the things with the viral thing spreading is that there's comments in them, and the comments say if they're good or bad. And so the polarization argument actually goes to the op, in my opinion. And the neg world was mentioned. In the neg world, things are better in the neg world. And then one more thing. All of the 4 points that they brought about between demystification, destigmatization, bridge, and reminder, I actually bought into those, and I thought that they were actually important. The only other thing I want to say is when you're using a statistic, the idea is a majority of people, because you're obviously usually going to use a majority, right? Statistic to prove something. A majority of people are doing something. So your actual job is to find the logical motivation for that and tell us about it and why it's more likely. Okay. That's it. Thank you so much. I was very honored to be a judge in this round.
Thank you.
so much to all the judges in the tournament, and good luck in finals, y'all.
Thank you.
Good round.
Bye, Jill. See you later. Leave meeting.
Excuse me. Hi, Joy. Are you still there? May I ask you a question?
Wait, Joel? Hello? Did you see my text?